There were years when my smile felt like a mask. I smiled to hide my exhaustion. I smiled so people would think I was okay. I smiled because I thought I should, to avoid troubling anyone. But deep inside was a woman who hadn't truly felt joy in a long, long time. There were moments when I looked at old photos and barely recognized myself, empty eyes hiding behind a forced smile. Then one morning, while making a cup of tea, I smiled, without meaning to. Because of the sunlight pouring through the window, because of the birdsong outside, because my heart felt light. There was no one beside me. Nothing special had happened. It was just that I realized my smile looked the most beautiful when it came naturally. Not to reassure anyone, not to cover up everything I was carrying, but simply a smile for myself. Because finally, I had learned to be gentle with the heart that had once been so tired. Nothing special happened that morning. Just the sunlight quietly pouring through the window, the soft chirping of birds in the garden, and the gentle scent of warm tea filling the kitchen. I was sitting there, and suddenly, I smiled. Not because someone was beside me, not to hide anything, not to reassure anyone. Simply because I felt enough. Enough to smile with my whole heart. Enough to realize that my smile no longer came from pretending to be okay, but from an inner peace, when I stopped running away from myself. That smile came when I stopped demanding perfection from myself. When I allowed myself to be wrong, to be fragile, and still chose to love myself anyway. After all these years, joy wasn't about gaining more, but about touching that quiet sense of wholeness within. And smiling, not for any reason, but for the simple truth that I am here, fully present, today. There were days when it felt like I was carrying the whole world on my shoulders. Worrying about my children, trying to be everything for everyone, always putting myself last, as if loving myself was something selfish. Back then, my smile felt more like a mask. I smiled out of habit, to keep others from worrying, but inside, I was tired and lonely. Until one day, I began learning how to let go. Learning to say, "Today, I'm tired." Learning to let my husband and children take care of dinner, while I quietly stepped out to the balcony, to watch the sky. Watching the people I love, clumsily preparing a meal, trying to care for their mother, their wife, with all their heart, even if imperfectly. I found myself smiling. Not because everything was perfect, but because, for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to take a step back, to rest, to be the one who is cared for. And it turns out, feeling light is its own kind of happiness. A kind of quiet joy that rises from within. That smile, no one gave it to me. It was mine to choose, once I stopped being so hard on myself. I was sitting out on the balcony, watching the clouds float gently in the afternoon light. Inside, my husband and kids were fumbling through dinner prep, a little clumsy, but full of love. The clatter of pots, the sound of my child giggling over a messy pile of vegetables, and somehow, my heart softened. Without thinking, I smiled, a quiet, unforced smile. And in that moment, I wondered, do I really need to apologize for my own joy? For simply living a beautiful moment, without doing anything more than allowing myself to enjoy it? There were times when I used to hide my happiness, afraid it might make others feel left out, afraid I'd seem careless, or too at ease, afraid my joy might somehow hurt someone. But now, I understand. Real joy doesn't hurt anyone. It softens me, warms me, and from that softness, I can love more fully. Turns out, the moment I stopped apologizing for feeling happy was the moment I started living honestly. And when we live honestly, we finally have the space to hold the people we love with gentleness and deep gratitude. For the longest time, I tried so hard to be right. Right on time, right in my duties, right in my roles, right by everyone's expectations. But sometimes, what feels right to others makes me feel suffocated. There were moments when I just wanted to say something silly, do something clumsy, laugh at the wrong time, or say the wrong thing, without needing to apologize, without having to explain. Then one afternoon, while watering the plants under the summer sun, I ended up watering my own slippers, soaking the floor, and I burst into laughter like a child. No one scolded me. No one laughed at me. There was only a woman, slowly learning to release that heavy need to always be right. I no longer need to be perfect to be loved. I don't have to be right all the time to be heard. I just have to be real, and that's enough. It wasn't a big trip. It wasn't a fancy gift. It wasn't a dramatic turning point. It was just a meal I didn't have to cook, a flower blooming at the right moment, or the sound of my husband and children laughing in a messy kitchen. For the first time in a long while, I felt light, simply because the things I once called ordinary suddenly felt so alive. It turns out, what brings me joy isn't what others call success, but the quiet breath of gratitude for a life that keeps unfolding, even if it's far from perfect. Maybe falling in love with life is just learning to notice again the tiny moments that used to slip by on a busy day. And you smile because you realize your heart still knows how to feel, and that alone is something beautiful. Nothing extraordinary happened that day. Just a late afternoon, sunlight resting gently on the floor, and I was making a cup of tea, leaning back in my chair. No phone, no to-do list, just being there. Watching the cat stretch and doze, hearing the soft clatter of pots as my husband cooked in the kitchen, listening to my daughter humming a tune in the shower. Every sound felt so familiar, like a little song composed just for me. And suddenly, my throat tightened, because I felt something, both new and strangely familiar. So this is what happiness feels like. It didn't come from anything grand, just the sense of being loved, without having to earn it. Maybe I once dreamed of a different life, but in that moment, I knew this was exactly what my heart had been longing for all along. There was a time I thought emotions were something to hide, especially the soft ones. I believed I had to be strong all the time, that if I cried, I was weak. If I admitted I needed comfort, I was a burden. But now, I see things differently. Now I know, allowing myself to feel doesn't make me less, it makes me more. More real, more connected, more alive. And the most beautiful thing? When I stopped being afraid of my own feelings, I also stopped judging them in others. I began to love more freely, to forgive faster, to listen without trying to fix. That's why I smile more after 50. Not because everything is perfect, but because I no longer hold back my heart. I let it open, and in return, life opens up too. Not everyone understands why I smile more after 50. But to me, it's the sign of a woman who's stopped trying to be someone else. I no longer push myself to carry everything. I no longer try to please everyone. I no longer live by the roles others expect me to play. And when I started living truthfully, when I began saying what I truly feel, listening to what I truly want, and loving the person I am. Joy slowly returned, gently, naturally, without effort. Like an old friend, coming home after years apart. Now, my smile doesn't need a big reason. Just a sunlit afternoon, a warm family dinner, or a quiet moment of stillness, and I feel something inside me light up. I've chosen to live truthfully. And that's the greatest gift my 50s have given me. If you're on your own journey of rediscovery, Heart of Calm is here to walk beside you, gently and quietly, reminding you that you deserve to live fully, and you don't need anyone's permission to begin.